rich, not wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wealthy is quiet. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, they don't wear name brands.
It's like Adam Sandler.
Hi guys, welcome back to our podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Today we're talking about separation anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
We sure are.
What a hot topic.
Very common.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
Do you think it's common because the dogs are genetically more inclined to it now, or do you think it's common because of nurture and like the relationships?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah. I think especially during like COVID is when that was like a huge spike because everyone was in the lockdown. Everyone got a puppy, and then they were with their puppy 24/7 for 4 months or whatever, you know? So I definitely think it like, it's a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture kind of thing.
It can be, it's a complicated issue in the sense that sometimes, a lot of the time, humans can, not that they're purposely doing it, but they can create anxious behaviors and an anxious, like we'll say, attachment to their human, where the dog's not confident being away from you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh my God, he loves me so much. Like, I love that he does that. And then we're actually like really nurturing a very unhealthy mindset in a dog that is not healthy or happy being alone or without you. Mm-hmm. And we run into the destructive behaviors that create anxiety, all of these like really serious behaviors that come out of like just doing too much all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think the reason, so it's interesting that you mentioned COVID because I do think there is a boom of separation anxiety, but I think it's because a lot of people's lives, like for the most part, if you live a normal-ish lifestyle where you go to work 5 days of the week and you have a social life and you have X, Y, and Z, if you get a puppy, you coincidentally typically won't have separation anxiety because of nurture, just due to like life obligations. Right. Like you have to leave the dog. Yeah. So you put it in the crate and you leave. And so you don't necessarily have to go out of your way to mitigate separation anxiety from forming because it just is a natural part of the routine. Mm-hmm. And so before COVID, I always felt like I saw a trend of people who had already worked from home or retired people that their dogs were always the ones that had separation anxiety. Yep. It was like if they were in that lifestyle of working from home or being retired, their dogs almost, even if that wasn't their main concern, almost always had at least slivers of separation anxiety symptoms because I don't think it's common knowledge about what to do to intentionally avoid creating separation anxiety if it doesn't just already naturally fall into your normal routine. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? I don't know that people really talk about it a lot.
Yeah. And like there are so many feelings about like crate training, and if I have, and I know you're similar and you're similar too, if we have a puppy that's in for board and train, I am always going to recommend crate training no matter what, because I think crate training is such a healthy skill to have to avoid the dog really being a danger to themselves and ingesting things. So a lot of people, like in the literature you read online about separation anxiety, there's a whole team of people that are not crate haters. They hate the crate. They don't think the crate should be used at all. They think it's making anxiety worse. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, going to the puppy thing again too, it's, you know, you get a puppy, they're cute, they're playful, all these things, and you go and put them in the crate. Right? Of course, that puppy has high energy. They're going to want to keep playing. They're going to want to keep interacting because you're giving them that affection. And I think for a lot of people, that is the hardest part, is seeing your dog whine and scratch the crate and do all these things and get rowdy and maybe gnaw at the crate too. And a lot of times I think it's just our own emotions that get the best of us, and so we feel bad or we get annoyed, and so we let them out. Right? Mm-hmm. And then they find that that's just their trigger, right? So then it's that separation anxiety of not only do they want to be by you all the times, but they know what they need to do to get what they want, you know? And that's where you get a lot of that, like those big,
it becomes like frantic
criteria. Yeah. And so you continue to allow that behavior, and of course then it never gets better, you know? But I think crate training, especially puppies, like you were saying and recommending, it's so good as long as you know kind of what to do, right? And how to handle those situations and how to kind of fight through it. But I don't know, in terms of obviously crating, I do definitely recommend that. But it just takes a little bit of that effort. And then, you know, even in terms of like adopting a dog, you know, a lot of people get in the mindset of, well, they were at the shelter and who knows how they were there and they were in the crate. And so like, I don't want them to think that it's like a prison or a punishment and stuff. And I totally agree with that, but it doesn't mean you don't use it. You know, yeah, it's like you're bringing your dog into a whole different environment, into a household where you're gonna build that relationship. You're gonna have that affection with that dog. So it's okay to work some of that separation anxiety and that amped up kind of behavior in the crate. You know?
I would be like, if I adopted a dog from a shelter, or, you know, the dogs that I have fostered in my home, they're from shelters. We don't know their background. We don't know anything. One of the first things I'm working on is crate training, because if I don't know a dog, it's like leaving like a loaded bomb at home. I don't know what I'm coming home to if that dog is not crated. And sometimes we use the human side and we're like, oh, I don't want them to be confined all day in their crate. I'm at work for 8 hours and I come home. And there's a lot of guilt around the crate, but really we have to be mindful that it is the safest place for dogs that have destructive behaviors, or they're going to hurt themselves or ingest something or tear your furniture apart and things like that.
Yeah. Well, do you think about like, so with younger puppies and crate training and stuff, if you don't use a crate, what are your options to help them learn independence? Like a playpen? Like you have to physically separate them from you in some way to be able to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish. So, because for me, the crate training is double-sided. Like, one, it's practical, it's safe, but then on the other side, it does have to do with the mental state of the dog and helping the dog be independent. So, like, could you tether your dog to you 24/7 and keep them safe? Sure, but you're still missing the benefit of the mental like growth that the dog is going to get from being separated from you, you know? And there has to be a balance of that. And yeah, your puppy isn't going to like it initially because they just came from an environment where either if they were at a shelter, they were with, if they're a grown dog coming from a shelter, they were with a bunch of other dogs, or in an environment where they weren't getting their needs fulfilled and they were stuck in a crate all day. So of course it seems like they hate the crate. Their overall association with the crate is pent up energy. Once you fulfill those needs and you retrain the association of the crate, it'll be fine. And then with a young puppy, they're coming from an environment where if you got them from a breeder or something, where they're with their litter mates and their mom all day. So they've never been alone.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they shouldn't ever be alone. It just means that it's a natural growth for them. And I think that it kind of comes back to the infantilizing, where people are like, oh, but if your baby was crying for you nonstop, would you just leave them? A puppy is not an infant at that point. Their rate of growth and maturing, they're an adult dog by 1 year old. So when you, like, is your baby an adult at 1 year old? Like, it's just so completely irrelevant to compare those two things. Like, I will leave my puppy crying in the crate if I know their needs are met. They don't have to go to the bathroom. They don't have to eat. They don't have to drink water. I've played with them. I've trained them. I've done all of the things I need to do. And now I need to go do laundry. And you're going to learn how to relax in your crate for a little bit. And that's so important for them to learn that concept and to be able to see the world going on around them and understand they can't engage with it and to learn how to relax into that.
Yeah, and that relaxation is so essential to a dog's life. Like, this puppy right here is sleeping on the bed, and a couple weeks ago she would be beside herself with moving. And you kind of have to, like we talked about in our last podcast, like, you have to instill the ability to relax and teach it as a skill set. And it doesn't happen immediately. And a lot of the people, the road bumps you often fall into is that we try the crate, and then how often do we hear, with no judgment to the client, but, oh, he didn't like the crate, so we stopped. Just because my dog does not like something does not mean that I'm going to immediately change what I'm doing.
My kid didn't like brushing his teeth, so we stopped.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Come
Wow.
on, guys.
My kid didn't like going to school, so, you know,
We stopped.
we didn't go to school anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are certain, like, and again, I agree with you. No judgment to clients. It can be, especially if you have a puppy that already has a genetic inclination to separation anxiety, and so their behaviors are that much more frantic and intense. It's scary, especially if you don't have the skill set or the knowledge base to like see it, know what it is, and know how to address it. But yeah, there is just certain unavoidable life skills as humans that are non-negotiable. You do them, right? Or it's detrimental to you as you get older or you grow or things like that. And that's how I view crate training with puppies. It is an unavoidable obligation of a life skill. You have to know how to do this.
Yeah.
There's no avoiding it.
Yeah. It sets the dog up for success. Also, if you are leaving them with a family member or at a kennel or boarding, if they already have the crate skill, that can be easily transferred over into a different environment without the dog freaking out, and like that who's ever caring for them is able to go places without being like, hey, your dog got into something and you need to come home immediately.
Right.
You have to pay this insane vet
Which
bill.
we've heard before. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. And I agree. I think it's just something that, you know, practicing at home, obviously they're gonna struggle with it at first, but they're gonna get more comfortable with it, obviously the more that they practice, and with you doing it too. Someone that they trust, someone that they know that they're gonna be able to kind of work through it with. So when going to a boarding thing, it's just a matter of like generalizing it. You know, it's something where it's like they still might be a little nervous, right? They still, if they've never been to this kennel before, the boarding place, wherever before, they still might be a little nervous. But with the practice, at least they have that understanding of like, okay, this is what I do, right? I go in here, maybe I whine a little bit, but it's something that I will be okay, right? I don't need to freak. I don't need to gnaw on the bars and get my paw stuck in the crate and all these things just because I'm freaking out, you know?
Yeah. Well, and if you have like a puppy that an important piece of crate training being successful, and I think a piece that a lot of clients miss, is that and I think just a general overall rule to keep in mind is that you should never be in a reactive state to your dog. So what that looks like is people will be like, oh, my puppy whined at 3 a.m. because they had to go to the bathroom, so I got up and I let them out and it was great, and they don't really see anything wrong with that. But the problem is that once you start putting your dog in a position where they need to tell you, I need out of here because I got to go to the bathroom, and you do it, I mean, you have to at that point, or what are you going to do? Just leave them in there so they poop themselves.
Right.
Now they've learned whining gets me out. It doesn't stop at, oh, I'm just going to whine when I have to poop. No, it's that bleeds over into everything then. Whining gets me out, whining gets me attention, whining gets me whatever. So when you get a puppy, prepare to set an alarm for 1 to 2 potty breaks in the middle of the night.
Right.
Because you cannot afford to let your dog tell you they need to go out. That's not fair to the puppy.
Right.
They're a baby. They don't really understand like how to control their bowel movements and how to warn you and how to tell you and all this stuff. I mean, when Snoop was a puppy, and I'd say his crate training is like impeccable now. Like he's great in a crate. Does he do okay in a crate when you watch him and you have him crated?
Yeah, he knows his routine to get into the kennel at night.
And does he whine or bark or do any nonsense?
No.
Okay. And I truly think that the reason why he does so well with it and he's quiet in a crate is because when I had him as a puppy, and he's a Chihuahua, so he needed more potty breaks than the average dog, I literally woke up every 3 hours in the middle of the night and would take him out. And there were times I'd wake up and he'd be dead asleep. And I'd wake him up and take him out, make him pee, bring him back in, put him back in, and go to bed. And again, you might wake up and be like, oh, don't wake the sleeping baby. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to do it. But again, I don't want to risk him waking up on his own and being like, oh no, I gotta pee. How do I tell her?
Right.
And so I literally try to avoid, under any circumstance, him ever having to make a noise out of necessity in the kennel. So then anytime a noise was made, I knew that I didn't need to pay any attention to it because I have done everything that you could possibly need.
Yeah.
Meeting his needs. I think it's also good to recognize that, like, even if you have not crated before and you come to training and we recommend the crate, or you adopt a dog from a shelter and you're starting the crate process, it's the very same as an adult dog. Unfortunately, I did not have access to all the information before I was a trainer with my one dog, Minnow. And Minnow, it was a complete psychopath. He spent all of his puppyhood not crated, and that was a really bad habit of mine. He peed all over my apartment. We had to like rent a carpet cleaner. He destroyed things. And I was like a young woman at that point. And I was like, it's fine.
It's just a puppy, you know, what's the worst that could happen?
So within this last several years, I've really gotten strict on crating him. Because I was realizing that every single time I did not crate him, one, there's accidents in the house. Two, he loves to go into the bathroom trash. And he that's his Roman Empire, is the bathroom trash. So I could keep spinning my wheels and having the same issues happen over and over again, or I could recondition him to the crate. We recondition him to the crate, and he does not love it. But, you know, it's the safest place for him, ultimately. So that didn't take too long to recondition him. So even if you have an adult or you haven't previously crated, you can definitely start. You know, it's going to be a process, but you can start to have that habit and that dog getting used to it as well.
Yeah. And honestly, I suppose, something to touch on is, you have a dog who, let's take the most extreme scenario. So let's take a hypothetical situation where a client comes to us with a dog who has such bad separation anxiety that if they put it in a crate, it will bust its teeth, it'll rip dew claws, it'll self-mutilate trying to get out of the crate. What are your guys' steps going to be with something like that?
Definitely investing in a high-quality crate.
You literally can't do anything until you get that.
Yeah. It comes down to, throw away your metal wire crate. If you have a dog that has that extreme, do not get a wooden crate. You have to look at heavy,
soft crates,
like a good crate for dogs with anxiety. And that was something I was.
They're expensive, but they're expensive for a reason.
And people shit on impact kennels or RTKs and for being escape proof. People are like, this is so cruel. And it's like, no,
it's safe.
Yes,
it's
so
safe.
Obviously investing in a good crate.
Especially if the dog has a history of actually getting out.
Yes.
Yeah. You cannot make any progress until it is impossible for them to get out.
Yeah. Yep. I had one of my friends, Merlin, he recently went through a phase because the dog was moved recently and had a new location where he was seeing some more aggression in his crate anxiety. And I think he left stuff on top of the crate, like a plant in cardboard. And of course, Merlin flipped everything and destroyed the plant on top of the crate. And then he's like, but I leave cardboard there so he has something to do during the day. He's shredding and he can bolt through the crate. And I was like, you are, I love you, but that is a way that we're kind of reinforcing the dog to be able
to be destructive.
Yeah, and then always having to be on and enriched. So the cardboard is a way that the dog is being destructive.
Yes. The crate should never be a place where you're adding enrichment. I am so against toys in crates, bones in crates, chews in crates,
slow feeders,
waters, nothing. My crates have nothing in them. Maybe a crate pad or something, depending on the dog.
And
but
hate that.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Because when I want my dogs that when they go into the crate, they shut off. That's the goal. Is that it's an off switch to them. Lumos at this point, my Dutch Shepherd is high strung as he is. Even if I gave him something in the crate, he won't chew it. It's his association with being in the crate is just so strong of that we do nothing in here. Yeah. And that's ideally what you want to shoot for.
Yeah.
You don't want a dog confined and stimulated. That's a very bad recipe.
But going back to what you asked, there are some dogs that have very extreme cases of kennel anxiety. So my suggestion, investing in a better crate, but like, what would your guys' next step be? Like, I'm thinking creating while you're home and being able to assess the behaviors that are happening. Are they scratching the crate? Are they barking incessantly? Things like that. But how do you start to work on, if you were going to make a month plan of working through some separation anxiety, how would you go about that?
Well, I think right off the bat, you got to work on getting them in and out of the crate. Before you even start working on stuff that's going on when the door's closed and they're in there, you have to get them comfortable with going in and out, because that's where they're going to give you a lot of the fight at first. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of like give up so fast too, because they just, they whip them in. And it's like, of course you're not going to want to be in something that you're getting like kicked into.
Because they never mentally made the choice.
Right, exactly.
You
so you have to allow them.
Close the door until the dog accepts being in it.
Yes.
If you can't put your dog in the crate and it stand there or sit there or lay there calmly with the door open and not be trying to come out, then you're not ready to close the door yet.
And you shouldn't throw treats in and then trick your dog into being
it's terrible.
They're not going to like it. Yeah. And then with coming out, you know, if you crack the door and they hear the latch open and they pile through you, it's like, okay, we need to work on that as well, because that also can't be like their response as well. They have to, similar situation of like, just be comfortable with the acknowledgement of like, I'm here until I'm released.
It's a mindset around the crate and just getting those like initial skills down, like getting in and out healthy. I kind of want my dog like to the point where I'm saying crate and they immediately go in, because I often use food because I want it to be a positive experience. I want that dog to flip around and look at me because they're like, okay, I want in the crate. And I can use food initially or a little bit of leash pressure to get in and out to create a positive association. So I'm not strong arming them in the crate, shutting the door and then going to work and being like, why do they have issues?
And if there's a dog that puts on the brakes, doesn't want to go in, I'll use food and throw food in there initially to at least lure them in and get them coming in and out and stuff like that.
Closing the door.
Exactly. No, the door is wide open. I'm throwing food in. They're doing the whole like, how far can I reach to get it without? And I just keep doing that. I'm not tricking them, whatever. And then once they're a little bit more open to the idea of the crate, you can switch over to some more leash pressure and just give them that little extra nudge to go in and out. And then switch from throwing the food in first to get in first, then you get food. And then from there, start working on them being comfortable waiting until released to come out when they go in. And then eventually, once the dog is super comfortable with that, then you can start closing the door. And I would literally like close it, open it, okay, and then release them and start working on that. And then if you can work your way up to that, generally you can do like 30-second increments where as long as they're nice and calm, you go let them out. I think depending on the age of the dog and the severity, like if we're going through our hypothetical situation and say it's an adult dog, I probably would have an e-collar on to correct for physical interaction with the crate. Like if I know it's as bad as like literally busting themselves and harming themselves, I think that using an e-collar to correct for like a physical interaction can be a method that I would implement. Again, I think it still is situation to situation dependent and how maybe that process leading up to that went would help me make that decision more thoroughly then at that point. But some dogs will be perfectly fine when the owners are present. But it's just when they leave,
it's like drilling that issue aspect out too. So one thing I'll tell clients to do is like get everything on, get your shoes on, get your keys, and go pretend like you're gonna leave, stand outside your house or your apartment, and just kind of hang out there for a minute, listen. I don't recommend like people getting super crazy about cameras because I think once you're at work or you're somewhere else and you cannot come home, that's going to cause you more anxiety that your dog is not settled in the crate.
How do you know that?
Not that I have a camera system, but
I think cameras are useful for a drill purpose.
Yes.
But
Yes.
do not open that camera if you
Yes.
don't have the ability to address what you see.
Right.
If you can do something about what you see when you look on that camera, you can look all you want. But if you don't have the ability to actually influence the behavior that's happening, it's not even worth it.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not worth getting those cameras that you can talk to and like talk through to your dog. Terrible. Don't do that.
Yeah.
It's a waste of money.
I just had a dog that came in, and he was very destructive. He's a little beagle, and I love his owners. I think they're the sweetest people, and they truly just love this dog so much. But huge kennel anxiety. He was like barking nonstop, but they wouldn't be in the mindset. They're like, oh, I feel bad, so we left him out. And then we came home, and he got into X, Y, and Z, and tore it all up. And I was like, so you'd rather live with a dog destroying your house than putting him in the kennel? So obviously we had that conversation, and they've gotten leaps and bounds better.
Yeah.
And for a while, she was so concerned about him barking in the crate, and initially like a little barking here and there, I feel like is okay, and it's pretty natural.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can't expect them to be like perfect.
Yeah.
With Sparky, so I have a client.
Yeah,
he was an
Sparky.
older dog. He's a really good case study, I think.
Yes.
So he was like 12. Insane reactivity and separation anxiety. Like if there was a reason for him to be loud, he was taking it. He was yelling all the time, nonstop. God bless him. And so he was like this terrier mix thing. And so what their issue was they had like a vacation home that was like a townhouse or a condo or something where they had immediate neighbors that they did not want having to listen to him screaming all day, every day. And yes, yeah. And they were, I mean, I think it was so sweet that they were like already taking that into account to be like good neighbors when the time came to try to address it. And for him, it was like he had no destructive behaviors. So on that point, the crate had never occurred to them as a necessity because he was not destructive. He wasn't having pottying accidents or anything. He was just loud. Yeah. And you could, sure, I mean, maybe there's some ways to address that without a crate, but I find that if a dog is loud because they're anxious, I think a crate is a really, really good option because I find that if you narrow their options, they're more likely to be able to calm themselves down. If you have a dog that's able to just ping pong around your house and bark at everything and look at all the windows and do all the things, like it's going to be much more difficult to get them to turn into the dog that sleeps on the couch all day. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm removing all of those options and you have to learn how to be in a crate, and then we just address the barking every once in a while in the crate. And it took us, he was like a very multi-step process. Yeah. Very multi-step process. Because he was even a dog where if you put him on a bed stay, he's barking the whole time. You know, so even stuff like that. And we worked through a lot of that. We worked through a lot of the crate stuff. For the barking in the crate, because vocalizing in the crate, like physical interactions with the crate is more clear-cut to correct for. Sometimes barking and whining in the crate, unless you know how to do it right, can be very tricky. And I always, some people will go straight to an e-collar or a bark collar, and I really don't recommend that until you've manually used an e-collar to help them understand that they're being corrected for the barking. You should not use a bark collar because there's no way to anticipate how they're going to respond to it. Right. And there's more nuance with an e-collar because you're manually doing it. So like if I correct and then the dog vocalizes because of the correction, a bark collar is just going to keep looping and then you could have an issue. Whereas if you correct with the e-collar, you allow them the space to respond and then see if they're going to fizzle out and calm down. And then you can kind of train a response in. And then eventually with Sparky, we did use a bark collar, which I believe they still use to this day. They have their routine of they put him in the kennel, they put his bark collar on, and then they do what they have to do. And we tested the bark collar out in a controlled environment. After I was very comfortable with how he was responding to the e-collar corrections for it. And it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It worked great.
Yeah.
And the bark collar that I like and recommend is a sport dog bark collar because it actually has a safety built in where it won't allow a loop.
Mm-hmm.
So if a dog gets I think it's 10 or 12 corrections within a certain amount of seconds, it stops.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it will
so
wait.
it does allow them to
It'll wait a little bit to be this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
Something's getting wild here, and then it'll stop for a little bit, and then it'll start again if it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
But
I use bark collars every day for 2 of my dogs, and it's just I've noticed the biggest difference in my Beagle with using the bark collar because yes, she had already had an association with the e-collar, but we were finding when we left the house, especially if I don't walk all of my dogs together, and if I was going for a walk with one group, she would be whoa, whoa. Could hear her down the street.
Yeah.
I can't have that. I have neighbors that could complain on either side, and I don't wish to disturb my neighbor's peace.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So we started using a bark collar, and prior to that, she was very whiny. She was very vocal in the crate, and I truly believe that the bark collar changed her.
Mm-hmm.
And she just doesn't do those things anymore. So yes, it's like a seatbelt. The bark collar's there in case she does vocalize, but rarely do I ever hear her making a peep anymore. Okay. And that's just what has worked for us. And I use one for another one of my dogs that Spork and Minnow get each other howling. So Minnow will start howling, and then Spork will start howling, and it's like a back and forth loop. And it's the most insane sounding thing. Pip will chip in, and Pip doesn't know how to howl, so she screams. And this was happening. Gosh. Yes, I checked my cameras when I was at work because I saw motion going off, and consistently, it was bad enough that the mailman came up one time and he's like, "Wow, your dogs really, really bark a lot."
Oh no!
Oh man.
So we had to work through it.
Yeah.
So does Spork or Minnow wear the bark collar, or they do?
They both do now.
Okay.
But it's more so Minnow was the starter of it. If you go "Hey Minnow," and you just sing song even a little bit, he's like, "Oh." And just using his vocal cords, such a good singer, but it's kind of place, you know.
And Spork just got duped into it.
Spork
is 100% the kid that would jump off a bridge if his friends did.
Oh yeah.
He would. He'd be like, "I'm in it, guys."
Even if his friends weren't doing it.
He would join a cult.
Yes.
100%. He's the perfect type.
He's the one that would join a cult but not know he's joining a cult.
Yeah, he'd have no idea.
He'd just be like, "Hey, I just got all these friends."
Yeah, wow, they really loved me here.
Wow, they feed you well here.
He said, "I'm handing out this Kool-Aid. I don't really know why, but we're all gonna drink it together." That's Spork. That's Spork for sure.
Love that guy. Anyways. Yes.
Are there any other aspects of it we haven't touched on?
Well, I was gonna ask you guys' opinion on the relationship between separation anxiety and resource guarding affection sort of thing.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any way in between that? Because just in terms of resource guarding owners and stuff, if there is that separation anxiety, do you think there's a chance of I can't be away from you, so anything that comes in between us?
Well, it's the sense of comfort.
Do you think there's
coming from
there's a link or
I think depending on the breed,
you
could see the link. I think that if you have most likely if you have a dog that's a golden retriever that has separation anxiety, it's just going to be a panicky mess.
Yeah.
I think if you have a German Shepherd that has separation anxiety, you will see resource guarding the owner probably, or stuff like that. Because I agree, I think there is a strong link because it's separation anxiety is at its core fueled by insecurity and control.
Yeah.
It's not love. It's not really
love.
Comfort, really, or anything.
And I feel a little bit of a dependency on the owners too.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
So
but a very unhealthy way.
You don't want your dog to be that way. I want to feel like my dog is confident to be alone, and I know I'm doing my best as a dog parent when I can teach them that skill rather than loving that my dog follows me from room to room.
Yeah.
And I think it's another thing to be
stressful.
said. Yeah, about how you're leaving the house. And just generally, like, overall looking at everything, over-affection constantly can lead to your dog just wanting to be with you all the time, which is not bad, but we have to have some kind of boundaries with ourselves.
Yes. Right. Yeah, 100%. Because when your dog is like, when they have separation anxiety over you, it's because they lack control, and that causes panic. You know, it's like when you're around, even if your dog doesn't have, some dogs with separation anxiety don't really exhibit the same typical traits of it when the owner is present. Like maybe they don't follow you from room to room, or maybe they're not constantly up your ass all the time, but you still see it when you leave. And the reason is still that if they wanted to access you, they could, they can, and you embrace it. You know what I mean? So then all of a sudden you put them outside and you close the door and you're inside and they're panicking and they're barking and they're jumping on the door because that ability to access you freely is gone, and they don't know what to do with that. Yeah. They have no idea. So once like a physical measure has been put into place, they start to panic. And they don't know how to cope with it. And that's where it becomes so important to, if you've had this dog since a puppy, train that from a puppy of you will be physically separated from me at times, and this is how you deal with it. Or if they're older and you start to see those things happen, making sure you take the steps to address it then as well.
And I can go into like creating like we talked about last time, a healthy window theory is that you have to allow time for your dog to rest. Because let's say you don't crate them in your home, and it's a puppy. They're going to go find their own fun. And I don't want my puppy going to find their own fun in my house with my things. And we have to be mindful, like, you deserve a break too. And there is this narrative that you should always be doing something for your dog or with your dog, whether that's enrichment, slow feeders, constantly taking them out for a walk. And yes, those things can be a part of a healthy relationship with a dog, but don't forget how important it is to teach your dog just to relax and be in their own space without talking to them, cuddling with them, having to touch them. You know, it's so important.
Like even with Snoop, like there are times where if I notice like I have a week or so where like every time we all hang out to like rest, he's always like wanting to be next to me or in my lap, because he'll go through phases like that. Every couple days, I just won't let him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I started doing that too.
Yeah, and like he'll come over and he loves to like, he'll like nudge my elbow because he likes to burrow underneath the blanket and cuddle in. And I usually don't care. But there's some days where he does that and I just push him.
I need my own space.
You know, and I don't let him, and he usually looks at me like, oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he stares at me and he like tries again, and I tell him no and I push him, and then he goes and he lays somewhere else. And I think it's so important to even recognize those patterns of like, okay, you're getting too comfortable with just being able to demand my space sometimes. So like, no, go over there and do your own thing now.
And especially like couch access is something that I've recently started to play with revoking. Because my dogs were like all 3 Chihuahuas, particularly the only ones allowed on the furniture, and they'd be like grouping here and I'd sit on them, and it was just so uncomfortable. And I'm like, all right, I got a new dog bed, and we're gonna practice that. And that had been challenging because you really have to focus on whatever rules you're, teaching. And yes, there can be contexts where sometimes there are snuggles, but I'm a big thing. Like if I'm eating on my couch, my dogs are not on the couch with me.
Yeah.
And if I have a guest over, yes, if the guest does not mind that interaction and they're inviting the dog up, sure. But for the most part, I want it to be invited. Where they're not just having access to my guests and certain minnow will lick your face, spark will go into your brain.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, I was curious on that too, because I feel like there has to be that independence, and I think that's kind of the whole root of this separation anxiety thing, is just making sure that your dog has some sense of independence, that it's okay to be alone, it's okay to be even in a downstay or on a bed stay 10, 15 feet away from your owner or whatever, from us, and be okay, right? And it's not the end of the world just because you can't be here, right? All upon me.
Yeah. It's like, I want you to think about that person in your life. We all have them. We've all met them. That doesn't know how to be alone.
Yes.
They're not very mentally or emotionally healthy.
No, people that like always have to be with a friend or
or like always get in from like one relationship to the next, the next, and they don't know how to just be alone and like just do their own thing. That is somebody who is not emotionally or mentally in a good place. Generally, I think that's a pretty easy consensus to come to. So you don't want your dog to turn into that.
Yes.
Where they're frantic and panicky and insecure and all that kind of stuff.
It's okay to recognize that our dogs are having a hard time in the crate and they're having a physical anxious response, and it's okay to like feel bad for your dog, but I would feel more bad that if we're continuing that mindset for the rest of your life. It's so unhealthy. Whereas if you really work on it and spend time on it, you're going to have far better results and not have to put your dog on insane amounts of medication to achieve those results.
Yep.
Yeah.
So don't get, while yes, separation anxiety can be overwhelming and it can be like a pretty debilitating issue to have for some people with their dogs, don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that will try to overcomplicate it, and they will really push. Usually if people say they're like a certified separation anxiety trainer, they don't care about your quality of life at all.
Yeah. They're more
truthfully,
focused on the dog.
they will try to dupe you into thinking that at all costs you must avoid your dog being stressed in the slightest, and you will be a prisoner in your own house forever. Your quality of life matters too. So even if you have a dog that shits itself, drools like crazy, has a terrible time when you leave the house, get yourself a crate that is safe for them to be in, and allow yourself the space to like still have a life while actively taking the steps as best as you can to work on that and mitigate it and get them to a point where they have less stress. But that doesn't mean you have to like sacrifice your quality of life and your ability to do things in the meantime.
Yeah.
Like that's just not fair or reasonable to expect of somebody.
It's not, and I think it's a very flashy trend right now to have like your certified separation anxiety coach or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But I highly like look into just working a lot of this stuff on your own as well, or reaching out to a professional trainer that has good ratings.
How did you get all the way over there?
Yeah.
Sorry. My drink was here, I kicked it, and then it's all the way over there. I don't know what happened, so.
I saw it roll.
Alright, well, thanks for joining us, guys. I hope this was useful.
Yeah.
This was a good talk. Cool.
Peace out.
See ya!